Welcome to this month's Insights interview from the Payments Association. I'm Tony Craddock. I'm the Director General of the Payments Association. Our VIP guest this month is one of industry's disruptors, someone who's championing change at a fundamental level that has a potential to change the world. His first 20 years in banking and payments helped establish companies build their businesses, but the next 6 years has been spent building fintech startups, including latterly his own. So to find out about his vision for change, the reasons why he moved from intrapreneur to entrepreneur, and what he thinks is coming our way in 2023, please welcome the CCO and co-founder of Ozone API, Huw Davies.
Hey Tony, yeah, thank you for the invite, and I'm now feeling very un-Christmassy when I look at your background. So yeah, I need to quickly decorate my office after this.
Well, don't worry, a bit of festive cheer with the good news we're going to get in 2023 would be all that the listener will want from you, I'm sure.
Fantastic.
So look, Huw, at the start of every Insights interview, I ask my VIP guest how they stay motivated, what makes them go the extra mile when they're trying to balance home and life and all the various priorities of running an international business. And I think it's particularly relevant for you. You've moved from what some people would say is a secure workplace for big companies into one that is potentially a risky one, new company, a new sector. What is it that continues to drive you, for goodness sake?
Yeah, this is a good question, and I spent a bit of time sort of thinking about this one. There's a selfless bit to it, and there's a selfish bit to it. I mean, we'll talk a bit more about what we do in a while, I'm sure. But kind of the selfless bit is I really believe that this shift towards open banking, open finance, open data is going to change the world. It's driving economic growth at a time where the world's facing a lot of economic challenges. It's laying the foundations to tackle things like financial inclusion and create more of a consumer data right, and laying the foundations for innovation and growth. So kind of what we're doing, we're trying to create the foundations for something that's going to have a massive change in the world, and that's really exciting. The selfish bit, though, honestly, it's because I really enjoy what we're doing. I've always been someone who kind of follows sort of two things. I want to do things that really interest me, and I want to work with people that have really good fun and I like to be with. And I kind of feel blessed and privileged that I'm working on something that is really interesting, and with a great group of people within the company and with everyone we work with around the world. And honestly, it's just fun. I'm enjoying myself hugely.
You have to be careful, Huw. They'll all want your job. They will.
Honestly, I mean, we're always looking to kind of continue to grow the talent within the business. And but honestly, I really love what I do. I love what we're doing. It's it doesn't feel like something where you really need to motivate yourself. It's enjoyable.
I know what you mean, and there is what you've just shared is a great advertisement for being an entrepreneur. Actually, generally, is you work with nice people, doing things that make a difference, and doing things you enjoy doing. But but there's many things you could have done. Some of our guests have, if you like, a North Star or two that helps guide them on that. What would you say your guiding principles are that have helped you in building Ozone API?
Yeah, I'd love to say I've always been incredibly thoughtful about my career. The reality is, and this is probably the same with a lot of people. My kids are sort of university age at the minute, and there's this view that you've got to know what you want to do. And I kind of, at the time, it's always felt like a sort of haphazard journey, just, again, doing things that just looked interesting and with people that I wanted to be with. And throughout my career, I guess that's been the driver. Every time I've made a decision and made a change, it's been about, again, working with kind of people I really like being with and doing interesting stuff. I mean, you look back and it's really easy to post-rationalize and say there was a really clear strategy around kind of where I went. The reality was I ended up, I think, focusing on building new businesses within big companies and obviously since and kind of over what 26 years I've made kind of that my thing. But the reality is it wasn't particularly thought through. It was just, that looks fun, I want to be part of that gang, and I kind of went and found the next opportunity. So I'm not sure. I mean, I'm probably a lot of people have a much more inspiring answer about their North Star. But for me, genuinely, it's been about, I've been attracted to doing interesting things with interesting people.
Well, that's by the way,
the whole thing.
That's a superb North Star. I mean, and you know what, if a lot of people did that, they'd end up being a lot more successful because they're being true to themselves. I think that's very cool. And you know, your career is interesting because, you know, you go back to Sheffield University. You know, you did this graduate management program at Barclaycard. You spent some time working in Italy and Portugal, didn't you? And you know, was there anything when you were young that made you prepared to be on the journey as an entrepreneur? Did you always think you'd be that way? And you know, would your parents have predicted you would become a business owner and leader as you are?
So nowadays, kind of, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. There's so many more startups and things like that. I mean, I was at university in the early mid 90s, and that was the point where, to be honest, it wasn't anywhere near as talked about. And when I was at school and kind of growing up, it wasn't a thing. You went and you qualified and you got a good job in a big company that would give you stability. So I don't think my parents would have been looking at it and saying, "Oh, here's someone who'll go out and set up a company," because that wasn't really the thought process. But I don't think they ever worried about me. I was the youngest of three, and again, I've seen this with my own kids. It's the oldest that gets the hardest time, and the youngest tends to get away with a lot more. But I think my parents never really worried about me so much. Because I was the youngest, but two, I don't know, I always just breezed along, getting on with everyone. So whether they were thinking as a future entrepreneur here or not, I doubt it, but I think they thought, hey, he'll probably be okay. It never felt like they worried about sort of me or my future. But again, it is back to that. I don't think I ever felt I was or I wasn't going to be an entrepreneur. It's just following that path of doing interesting things, working with interesting people, and it just kind of evolved.
Well, but that's lovely, and in a way, that's probably where I think most people who are running a business are. It's not many people think, "Oh, one day I'll be a successful business owner." My father thought I would be a country solicitor.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, what some people do, some people are right from the beginning, I want to go and create my own company, my own wealth. I mean, I took a pretty easy path. I went onto a graduate program, and it creates some great opportunities. And yeah, and through that, I ended up building a whole load of new businesses within big corporates, whether that was kind of new digital payments division or new country businesses or all of this sort of stuff. And it just got to the point where I was sort of looking back saying, well, I think I'm doing all right at this. I'm doing a good job of building companies for someone else. I can go and do this myself. But by that point, you've got 20 odd years of experience. So I think it's probably much harder to do it when you're 21, but also you'd have fewer worries and barriers and all of those things. To be honest, I don't know the right answer, but that's the route I went.
But in a way, you de-risked it by working for somebody else and learning how to do it, and that makes a lot of sense. And you know, in our industry has developed. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the payments industry, because this is the crucible in which you've chosen to be an entrepreneur. You know, while you were going through your university career, the industry has been developing for 50 or 60 years. You know, and it's got a pretty good track record of delivering secure, low-cost, near instant payments that serves the interests of people in the ecosystem, and it's done pretty well. But a lot of people would say, if they look back at what we've built as a payments industry, they wouldn't design as it is now. I know you're trying to change the industry. Can we talk a bit about what you think of the industry, what's working and what's not, and maybe a little bit about open banking and open finance, why that might be a better way, and let's also talk specifically. I will ask you, if you haven't told me, what you think. Well, let's first of all, the industry and what's working and what's not.
Yeah, so I mean, again, I've 26 years in the payments industry now, and in the time I've been in, it's been huge amounts of progress, transformation, development. And I mean, as we've seen, we're moving from economies that were mostly cash-based to now economies that are mostly digital payments based. And as you say, the experiences are getting slicker and quicker. The security is getting better and safer in most instances. So I think we've seen a huge amount of transformation. I guess one of the shifts, most of that progress, I think, to date, has come through middlemen taking out pain and complexity and making things work better. That's often the way. You've got a point of a payer and a payee, and there's a lot that happens in between. There's a full, I mean, as your membership, Tony, outlines, there's a very full value chain in between of players that are helping with the connections and the complexity and all of those sorts of things. And that's done an amazing job. And again, looking at things like sort of Apple Pay and Google Pay and the digital wallets, taking out even more of the friction and making things more secure and reducing the need for credentials to be shared and all of this stuff. Some really good stuff, but it's largely, for the last sort of 20-30 years, been about layering on an existing infrastructure and sort of specialist middlemen taking out complexity. I think we're on the verge of a shift from this sort of centralized model where everything goes through a kind of a central network or central middlemen that handle complexity, to a more decentralized model where providers on either side of an ecosystem are able to connect directly. And that's what we're seeing with open banking and open finance, the ability for the source to expose a common interface for anyone to connect into.
Why is this better, Huw? What is this improving or removing?
So I think firstly, what it's creating a foundation for something that enables a next stage of transformation of the industry. I guess the success measures in payments are kind of things just work. It works, and it has the right level of friction, which is either zero friction or the right level of agreement and approval before something happens. And it's secure and it's trusted. And a lot of payments work really well today, and there are still sort of pain points. There are still areas where there's a lot of friction. There's ongoing challenges in the industry, and probably always will be to some extent around fraud. It goes to the easiest possible route. That used to be cloning mag stripes, and then that got a lot harder. Now it's targeting people to get them to make a payment to the wrong place. It always goes for the easiest option. So those challenges around kind of getting the right user experience, the right level of security and trust, and the right economics remain challenges within the industry. I think what the open banking, open finance shift creates is an opportunity to do some of these things differently. So there will always be, I think there'll always be in the payments industry, because there's so much complexity, there'll always be a role for people in the middle to simplify the value chain.
Yes.
But I think over time it becomes less about the commoditized stuff of how you connect, and it becomes more about the value add of how you deliver better outcomes for
Yes.
for the end users. Well, but I think fundamentally, I think what open banking and open finance does is it lays a foundation for a more decentralized payments industry, which can bring some significant opportunities. So it can bring some significant benefits in terms of the economic model. If it's done, we're not there yet. So a world where everything's mandated and the banks are having to do certain payments for free and everyone's fighting it out for what's the right model. We're nowhere near there yet, but creating a more direct connection between payer and payee's account, I think, can simplify the value chain.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say as well, and with that, there's the opportunity to improve user experience and the intelligence. So the consent can be very, very programmable or parameterizable around the use case, whether it's a one-time payment, a recurring payment, supplier payments with rule sets. There's opportunity to create a lot of innovation, and in a way where no credentials ever get shared, and there's a really strong security and trust model between the parties to the transaction.
Yeah,
the foundations are there to really tackle those measures of the right amount of friction and great user experience, security, and the economic model. But at this stage, the foundations, it needs to really kind of grab hold.
Very good. And we're in a long-term cycle of change here, aren't we? So in light of that, what are you looking at seeing happening in 2023 regarding open banking in particular?
Yeah, so there's probably a couple of things. So I mean, we have a very global outlook on this. So one of the things that we are seeing in 2023, this will become ever more global. So right now, the shift towards open banking, open finance, open data is happening right around the world. There are a few markets that have done it in a very structured way so far, like UK and Europe through PSD2, Brazil, markets like Bahrain. But there's a long list of the next markets waiting to go. Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Canada, Saudi Arabia, many markets around the Middle East. And even the US is now starting to look at this with regulation coming. So I think 2023 will see this become massively more global as a structured standards-based movement. I think closer to home, what we'll see in the UK is maybe a couple of things. We've started the move now from it being a compliance project to being a genuine commercial channel for banks. I say we've started. I think the likes of NatWest are doing an amazing job here with their bank of APIs and exposing sort of variable recurring payments APIs as a commercial platform for third parties to build on. But we're right at the beginning of that journey. So I think we'll see proof points which will lead to more of the banks sitting up and taking notice and proving some of the models and the use cases that will hopefully mean this becomes much more of a seismic shift across the industry. So yeah, globalization and starting to move to commercialization. So
and presumably Ozone API helps within that process. You know, you've been building the company through the pandemic, through the war in Ukraine and the consequent cost of living crisis, interest rates. You haven't exactly chosen an easy time, have you?
No. I mean, it's one of those. If you think all of those are coming, it's definitely the wrong time to try and build a business. Although actually, some of those things have that transformation to, again, much more of a digital and a remote way of building a bit. Some of those have actually been good tailwinds rather than headwinds. But yeah, there's a lot going on in the world.
So tell us what bit Ozone API does.
Yeah, sure. Well, so I guess as the quick background. So myself and Chris and Freddie, the other two co-founders, we were all part of the leadership that helped design and deliver open banking in the UK. So I was part of OBA leading the development of the ecosystem. Chris is the guy that led the development of the open banking standards, and the UK standards have become a bit of a blueprint that's been built on around the world.
Yeah.
And Freddie was the chief architect and technical author. And between us, we, on one hand, we had this common view that actually this is a movement that will transform the industry and transform society and economies. This is a good thing to do. But at the same time, we were seeing this was really hard for the banks. So delivering really good APIs that meet the standards, that give a good developer experience, user experience, conform and comply. I think all of the banks that went out and tried to build it themselves found it much, much harder than they expected. So what we did, we set out to build a technology platform that really helps lay really strong foundations for this change. So we do two things. We work with banks and financial institutions around the world to help them deliver their open banking and open finance APIs. I mean, basically, we take away all of the hard bits so that they can deliver APIs that align with the right version of whichever standard for wherever they operate, have the tools to kind of manage the security model, manage consent, dealing with the third parties, all of their hard stuff, and deliver a great developer experience and the tools to manage that channel. So we're working with many banks around the world to power their open banking, open finance APIs. So we sit on kind of the bank side of the ecosystem to help them do it really well. The other thing we do is we still work with some of the central banks and regulators to help them put the right conditions in place. So, for example, we're working with the central bank in Saudi Arabia at the minute, where we've been helping take existing global best-in-class standards and improve them and make them work for the market, and provide some central technology that helps the market get there quicker.
So you're essentially exporting best practice in open banking.
Yeah. What we're trying to do is firstly deliver amazing technology that's bringing in the best of everything that's happening around the world, and around that, I think we have, as a team, and we've got an amazing team of people that have been at this for quite a few years. As a team, I think we've got a depth of expertise around particularly this sort of open banking, open finance standard space that just doesn't exist anywhere else. That's allowed us to help banks and FIs and central banks get there quicker.
No, you said that's cool. Now you said you should be in sales, and you said that you're doing some work in Saudi Arabia. You've also been focusing quite a lot on Latin America. Why there?
I mean, what we want to do is ultimately be wherever this is happening at scale, so we can help the market get there. So right now, our focus is exactly that. It's where it's really happening at scale. So that's been sort of UK and Europe, Middle East, Latin America. Longer term, it will be many more parts of the world, with it coming in Canada and the US and everywhere around the world, essentially. But Latin America is really interesting. So Brazil was the first market and the central bank did an amazing job, had a really clear vision, and have driven a complete open finance agenda in a pretty short time period. So Brazil, we've been involved in Brazil since sort of 2019, 2020, laying the foundations for this and helping get ready for the market. But in the last year or so, all of the banks were implementing open banking. It's now moving into open insurance and a broader open finance phase. What we're seeing is many other markets in the region are also now moving in a similar direction. They'll all look a little bit different, but Mexico they've had a fintech law around open banking for a number of years, now getting towards an implementation phase. Colombia, Chile, Central America, it's a really hot market. So we're very active there, and that's why we're there.
So in other words, you've gone where the market is, which is very, very smart. So what can we learn in Europe from what's happening there?
So I guess, so one of the challenges I think we faced in UK and Europe is it's really hard to go first, because you take a lot of the pain in the learning process. Actually, if we look at the UK's done a really good job. So the UK, I think we realized the importance of technical standards and the importance of high quality implementation and delivery. And whilst it wasn't always easy, I think that's what we've achieved in the UK, and it shows why the UK is way ahead of Europe, in terms of the uptake and adoption of open banking. I think what as we look at the next markets, there's a lot that the UK and Europe can learn. So just take a couple of examples. So Brazil, again, that same philosophy of standards are key. But a couple of really important things, that the importance of conformance and certification around the standards by everyone is fundamental to the approach in Brazil. So if everyone does it slightly differently, it's just a really inefficient market. So Brazil they've combined a really strong standards-based approach with a faster payments network, and it's really flying. If we look at what's happening in Saudi Arabia, again, I think there's some really good learnings. The central bank, they've got a really ambitious vision to transform society, the Saudi 2030 vision, and they see open finance as a core part of transforming society and economy. So it's very growth focused. It's not about a penalty to the industry. It's very growth focused, and therefore it's been designed to ensure balanced incentive for all of the participants. So there are API services where it's right that there's a commercial value exchange. There are APIs being designed that help banks drive to embedded finance much more effectively and quickly. So I think that commercial balance, along with a real focus on standards and quality of implementation, are the things we're seeing in the next markets that we certainly missed in Europe. And I think we're battling with this sort of commercial balance in the ecosystem at the minute.
It's a shame, isn't it, really? Because you'd think you'd get the top prize for coming first. And in this case, it doesn't suggest that that was the right strategy. We should have perhaps sat on our hands a little bit and come second. But maybe we've got a chance to kind of to learn from what's now happening elsewhere and retrofit that into the next phase of our evolution. I do want to talk to you about the community work that you've been doing, but I also want to, let me just touch on what's happening in the UK. This will go out early in January 2023, and we're at the stage we're sort of in between the latest iteration of thought leadership around but initiated by the Joint Regulatory Oversight Committee and working with the Strategic Working Group and all the various 100+ industry participants. But it's trying to unblock where we are. We sort of seem to have got stuck. Do you think those will work? And do you think, how much hope do you have for that being, helping to resolve the problem?
Yeah, before I come to that, just a reflection on what you were saying a moment ago. So I actually think there's a huge premium associated with going early. So I think what the UK has done, the UK has created a really good blueprint that others have built on. I mean, the UK regulators have already got good reputation globally and work well with regulators around the world. And I think we've driven a huge amount of inward investment into the UK, job creation into the UK. So I think there's some real positive, but I agree that learnings to come back into this process.
So can I a story that's never very popular, but the UK was instrumental in creating two things that had exported really, really well in the last 2 centuries. One was contract law, and one was bureaucracy. In other words, organizational design and governance. And however much people might lament our role on the global stage as those evil colonialists who cut and burned, the reality is we exported something, and our language, we exported that in a way that actually makes us a small country that is continuing to, I think, punch above its weight. And partly because we were first in those ways. So, and I think something like standards, which is what open banking really is all about, is another example of that. And if people are using our standards, then in a way we've exported that must make it easier for people to adopt our approach.
Yeah, I think that's right. The challenge is there is a real danger of us getting into a kind of almost a catatonic state of no movement, and the world just carries on, and that opportunity has gone, which is kind of back to the sort of where are we with the kind of the JROC and all of the working groups and the things like that. This is one where I definitely have mixed thoughts. I'm a probably unhealthily optimistic person in my outlook on most things. So I need people around me who are really good at kind of helping with the blind spots, because I'm very optimistic. So there's a lot of hope in me that I think we've created a great start point with open banking. I think open finance and open data, I genuinely think it can kind of transform economies and society.
It will. I agree, it will. It's only a matter of...
And we've got a great start point. So I'm hopeful that journey is going to continue. The bit where I'm a little fearful, it feels like there are so many stakeholders and so many committees and even so many regulators that need to coordinate. It just feels a bit hard. If I look at some of the other markets around the world, there's a strong central leader with a clear vision for the economy, and they're kind of going out and making it happen. We saw that. I think that the central bank in Brazil did a great job. We're seeing a similar approach in Saudi Arabia, as I mentioned. My fear about a committee of multiple different regulators trying to define a way forward, and then underneath that, multiple committees of many different stakeholders with very different polarized views, just feels a bit hard. It feels to me like it needs some very strong leadership to define a direction. And so you're not going to satisfy everybody, but define a direction and make it happen. And I think there's and we've talked about this many times, Tony, the breadth of membership within the Payment Association. I think there's a really good opportunity to help kind of summarize where are the points of contention, where are the obvious areas, where are the challenging areas, and help support whoever's providing that leadership. But my fear is if we're a bit too British about this, and we have too many committees and too many shops, nothing's going to move for a long time, and we will fall behind.
And we won't please all the people all of the time. I do hear you, and it's interesting. We've sat down with UK Finance, the E-Money Association, F-Data, and we've written a letter to the Joint Regulatory Oversight Committee saying the process that we've been working through and supporting, we don't believe is optimum, because it doesn't take us to where you answer the question, what does this all mean? And we volunteered our time and our resource to help to be the catalyst for creating some of the clarity that you've been mentioning, and I hope they take us up on their offer. But this is the part. But you're just mentioning the trade association. It's interesting. So we met, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and I remember when I thought about the sort of people who were going to be the movers and shakers, the guys who were going to be asking the unaskable and stirring things up a little bit so that we could actually effect some change. I thought of you, and you put yourself forward to the board, and you were voted on by our members, which was brilliant. And you've actually taken the championing of the open banking component within the advisory board of the Payment Association for 4 years now, for which, on behalf of the community, I formally thank you. You're just coming to the end of your 4th year. We try and we do what's called to proactively resign members who have done 3 or 4 years, which how you can be resigned, I don't know. I don't think that actually is a verb, but it ensures that the community is fresh. But it means to say that it means to say you won't be having that role anymore. But what was it that made you take so much time supporting the community over the years?
So I actually similar sort of thoughts and feelings as what's driving me in the business that I'm in at the moment, and the choices that I've made. interesting challenge with a really good group of people. I mean, I think, I mean, I've been in the industry, and I've been fortunate to be in the industry for a long time now, and I've really enjoyed my time in the industry. And it was a great group of people that were forming the advisory board, a number of which I knew very well, a number of which that I didn't. But it's a really good group of people to be involved in, with some interesting challenges. I mean, the opportunity to help influence and shape the industry, you'd be nuts to pass that up. So that's a really interesting thing to be involved in, and just get a different perspective. Again, through my career, I've been fortunate. I've sort of been involved in all parts of the industry, on the kind of the bank and the card issuer and lender side, on the merchant side, in the central network, now in the open banking, open finance space. And it's always a real benefit and privilege to be able to see an industry from a kind of a lofty height, and work with people in different parts of it. So firstly, it's a really fun and stimulating and rewarding thing to be involved in, with a great group of people.
Yeah. We do have fun, don't we? We do have fun. It's good. And it's interesting, we've decided this year, the year ahead, to do an international advisory board meeting. Look at that. And then, but you will then in December next year, you'll be invited to the alumni. No, in fact, I think it's happening April 24. We're doing a big alumni, but all the 40 or so members of the advisory board from the beginning will be invited to a big night out, which should be fun.
That'll be awesome.
Yeah, we do have some. Well, that's good to say. Good to hear. And things that we should be focusing on in 2023. Do you think? What should we be focusing on?
I mean, there's a really interesting set of projects that the association are focusing on, and it's a really interesting period in the industry from a policy perspective. I mean, we've got some significant transformative forces at work, right? With kind of crypto and CBDCs, and what's the right approach for driving digital currencies, as well as open APIs, kind of enabling this move from what was a very centralized ecosystem with everything pointing into the middle to a decentralized ecosystem. And that's bringing a lot of challenges around, or a lot of interesting opportunities on the policy side. What is the right future and governance model for this? The commercial side, how do you actually make this work well for all parties? So there's some really interesting, it's a really interesting point in time, right? So, and I know the right projects are in place to continue to focus on those. But yeah, I guess those two are the big transformative forces that seem to be happening, with that ongoing challenge around how does the industry continue to combat fraud and sort of close the weak links. And I think that does include, and I know many talk about this, helping, kind of coordinating with other industries, because quite often the weak links are elsewhere. They show through in payments, but it's other channels that are enabling that weakness. So yeah, I think kind of they're the three big areas in my mind.
Very good, very helpful. So finally, you've given me your insights for half an hour or so, for which I'm very grateful. If we're, there's lots of young people thinking about a career in this industry, what advice would you give a new graduate who came up to you and said they were thinking about following in your footsteps? What tips would you give them?
I would certainly say chart their own path. For me, again, the fundamental principles that have always driven me: do something you enjoy and be with people you like, and then kind of good things tend to happen. Because if you're doing something you enjoy, it tends to be less of a burden and you tend to get better at it. And if you're with people that you enjoy being with, and I mean, everyone has slightly different perspectives in terms of how they engage with other people. But if you're with people that inspire you, again, it tends to kind of help you get through the day in a really enjoyable way and inspire you to the next thing. So
yeah,
that kind of looks a little bit different for everyone else, but for everyone. But I think it's focus on the things you like rather than early in your career. You're always told to focus on your weaknesses, and actually I think that's important as early in your career to kind of build out the breadth, and through that you understand actually where are the things that you like. But I'm a great believer in focus on the things you really enjoy doing.
Sounds like a great bit of advice for a youngster and for an oldster as well, but somebody slap in the middle. Huw, thank you very much indeed. CCO, co-founder of Ozone API, and alumni member of the Payment Association's Advisory Board. Thank you very much indeed.
It's been my pleasure, Tony, and again, thank you for putting up with me on the advisory board for the last 4 years. It's been great fun.
It's been great fun. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.